Okay guys, so as previously stated, we're going to do the balsa wood, and this is what your end product would look like. So I'm going to take you through the steps and how to embroider on the balsa wood, how to put this in the frame, how to go to the embroidery machine, and then again how to add the practically glow on top to give it this nice shine. So I'm going to set that aside. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a raw wooden tray that's available at your local crafting stores. So they come in different sizes and different lengths, they come in different cuts. So you can choose the one that's suitable to your needs. So you have to paint this to start with and prepare this. So I've done this already to save us some time. I've painted the tray already. So what you can use is different crafters paint. I've used a craft acrylic and I used this beautiful grey color. So to paint your tray, what works best is if you use 2 coats. You can see mine is coated pretty nicely. So to paint this, I take it that most of you or everybody knows how to paint. So I'm not going to paint the tray in front of you, but just some tips. You have to paint in one direction and then let it dry and then paint in another direction. And that will help you to avoid stripes. What you can then do is take a very fine sanding paper and sand it down and then paint in the different direction before you put the second coat. If you do feel that you need a 3rd coat, please go ahead and do that. It's up to everybody to create their own masterpiece. So then this is what your tray would look like with 2 coats on it. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside for now, and then we're going to go to our embroidery frame. I'm going to work on the Brother XB Luminaire. So to start off, we're going to frame in the biggest hoop that's available to me. This is our 272 by 408 millimeter frame. And you are going to frame a layer, just one, of stitch and tape. I'm going to put this aside. Okay. So, I'm going to try and not waste any product. And we're going to frame the product. Just need to loosen my frame a little bit. And put that in nicely. There we go. So once your first layer is framed, tighten your hoop. Make sure it's jumped out. Sometimes it doesn't. If I loosened it too much, just tighten it again. Here we go. Okay. Make sure the sides are down and clamp it in place. And if you can, pull this a little bit tight. Make sure it's aligned so it doesn't pop out in the middle of your embroidery design. Just going to loosen this a little bit again. There we go. I'm going to loosen it because you don't want to create bubbles really on the inside of your frame or on your stabilizer. Go out of the way. Go. So once you've hooped your stabilizer, you can set this aside. I'm just going to pop it over here back into my embroidery machine, and that can wait right there. So for now, I'm going to pull my tray back in. I'm going to take a measuring tape, and I have to measure my frame or my tray. And this tray measures 29 by 41 for the inside. So I know that is what I'm going to need for my balsa wood. So to set that aside, I have different sheets of 4 sheets of balsa wood over here. So balsa wood comes standard in a 1 meter by 10 centimeter wide piece. You can buy them at your local hobby shops. You get different thicknesses as well, but it's very important to work on the 1.5mm thick. Please don't go any thicker, it's going to be hard on the machine. So for our project, we are working on a 1.5mm thick balsa wood. So I'm going to pull my tray in again, just to show you there's different ways that you can place balsa wood in your tray. You can either do it lengthwise and stack them in like this. But then as you can see, you're going to need 4 sheets to do this. Okay. And I don't want to cut 4 sheets up. You can cut this one multiple times if you would like. But I'm just going to work with 3 sheets. It's always easier to use less sheets because then you have less possibility of the balsa wood moving around. So I'm going to move it so that it is in the length of my tray, like this. I'm going to work in this way. Okay. So I'm not going to put that one too far away. Just move that forward so I can have space. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to align my pieces of wood, and I'm going to use painter's tape to tape them together. This is a tape that doesn't have a very strong adhesive, and this is very good because I don't want to peel off any pieces of the balsa wood. So I'm just going to take a piece, align the balsa wood, place it next to each other, and just tape it in place. I'm going to do this for about 2 pieces. Just to see this one's moving a little bit. See if I lift this off now, it comes off pretty easily. So I can just smooth that out and make sure it is flat. And then you're going to do the same with the 3rd piece. So again, align it, make sure it's nice and flat. Sometimes the balsa wood does curl up like that, but when you put it in the embroidery frame and when you glue it down in your frame, in your tray, it would be secure. It would stay in place. And again, align this one. When you align it, you can see you can barely even see the joints anymore. Okay, so we're gonna put that too far away. We're gonna grab a pencil. Like I measured earlier, my tray is 41 on the inside. So over here, my tray is 41 on the inside. But I want to cut it a little bit bigger, just to have that extra space. And I'll trim it down a little bit later when we're done with the embroidery. So I'm going to measure about 43. I usually add about 1 centimeter on each side, just for safety. And I'm going to make a mark so that I can cut through it. 43, mark, and 43, and make a mark. Then I'm going to take my Sewers Companion ruler. I'm just going to make a straight line where I can cut. There we go. So it does make quite light lines. You can see that over there. And you would just use your normal paper scissors to cut straight through the balsa wood. Try not to bend it and keep it as flat as possible when you cut, and then you can just place that piece aside. If you want to, you can also use a rotary cutter to do this. Make sure it's a rotary cutter that's maybe a little bit been used, so it's not your brand new rotary cutter. And then that one is out. And then the 3rd piece. There we go. So once our pieces have been cut to the length we want them, make sure your tape is secure. We're going to bring back our embroidery frame. And you're going to use 505 spray adhesive to adhere the balsa wood to the stitch and tape. Make sure you give it a good shake. And you don't have to spray a lot. It's just to keep it in place. And remember to always spray away from your machines. going to flip this so that angle is... There we go. To make sure there is some tack on there, we can use a little bit more. There we go. And now you can place your balsa wood in your embroidery frame. Try and frame it as center as possible so that your embroidery is also center. And just tuck it down. If your balsa wood sticks over the edges, like mine does over there and here, don't try and press it in, don't break the balsa wood. See over here as well, it's going over my frame. Leave it like that, just make sure the pieces in the middle is securely in place. And everywhere where you're going to embroider, where you're going to be, where the needle is going to penetrate the balsa wood. So set that down. Now what I do is I take these middle pieces and I move them to the side to keep them in place as well. So this is where the painter's tape comes in handy, because you can easily now peel this off without having any troubles. And because you have the spray adhesive at the bottom, they stay next to each other. They don't move and open up over here. So the joins stay closed. Just lightly lift this up and move it to the side. There we go. Okay. What you're going to do next is you're going to take some Avalon and you're going to place a piece of Avalon big enough to cover where you're going to embroider over this, over your balsa wood. Get a sharp scissor. Get a clean cut. So set that aside. And you can use your pins to pin the Avalon in place. So, but don't pin through the balsa wood, pin the Avalon to the stitching thing. You can even pin through the tape, it's fine. Just make sure the Avalon stays in place. Don't stick the pins through your fingers like I usually do. So I always say more pins is better, just to keep everything in place. If you see my projects, I have more pins than fabric sometimes. Okay, so flip this around, tighten the Avalon over the project. I need extra hands. And start sticking to the middle. There we go. And then just pull it straight so it doesn't create any excess bubbles. And just pull it straight to the other corner. And now a piece of balsa wood is framed in your big frame, or whatever frame you decided to use, and you've pinned your Avalon over the balsa wood, taking care not to squish the corners over here. From here we're going to move to our embroidery machine. Okay guys, so now we're going to move to the machine. So bring over your embroidery frame with your framed balsa wood and slide your frame or click your frame in place depending on your machine. And make sure it is locked in place. I'm going to go to embroidery. You want to go fetch my design. I've saved it earlier. I've saved 2 llamas and a cactus on the same screen. and I'm using my grid at the back so that I can make sure my llamas are aligned at the bottom, so they're standing at the same height. Okay. So I know everything is centered. I'm going to go embroidery, and I can start with my embroidery process. But before I do that, I want to add a little bit of extra stabilizer below or underneath my frame. So I'm going to float a piece of Cutaway Stabilizer. So I'm just going to cut a piece that's big enough to fit underneath the balsa wood. So I could have measured this earlier. I have it ready. So I'm just going to put that roll aside. So when you have your piece of Cutaway Stabilizer, just slide it in underneath the frame. Make sure it's in place. Okay. This just creates some extra stability for the balsa wood, because remember, the embroidery would perforate through the balsa wood, so you need an extra stabilizer, or you can even frame 2 layers of stitch and tear. But I find what works best for me is 1 layer of stitch and tear and 1 layer of cutaway. So now we can see we're going to do our little lady llama first, and we're going to do the inside of her legs. So I'm going to get my colors. I've decided I'm not going to do a beige llama. I want to do a grey llama, so I'm going to play with different colors of grey. These two have quite a nice contrast. Let's see if I don't want to use one that's a little bit darker. No, I like these two together. And make the inside. Look at me throwing things around. Let me just grab that one again. I think I'm going to use the darker color for the inside of her legs, for the inside of their legs, both of them, and then the little lighter color for their bodies. And this is now where you can play and bring in your creativity. So the machine is telling me what colors it needs. So I'm going to start by framing. I'll start by embroidering my darker color. I like dropping my foot so that my tension plates close. Cut that off. And you can use an embroidery needle. Make sure you start with a new one. It does get blunt quite quickly. I did already replace my needle to a new one. And then after you've done your embroidery project, take out the needle, because it does get quite blunt, so that you start with a new needle on a new project after this one. So from here, I can just press embroider. But now what is very important for you to remember when you start embroidering the balsa wood is you have to support the balsa wood, especially where it comes closer to the edges, where it doesn't always touch the stitch and tear underneath. So it's very nice as if you frame the abalone quite tightly, and it keeps the balsa wood down. So my machine is going to move, and you just follow with your hands along. And you just give it that little bit of extra support. Very important as well is you need to slow down your machine's speed. I like to slow it down to about 600 stitches per minute. That's a very nice speed to work the balsa wood. And you can carry on. I'll move the camera in closer now to show you that a balsa wood design is quite an open design. It's not a full design like normal embroidery designs. And this is like I said earlier, for the thread and the needle perforates the balsa wood. So open designs work best, so that the balsa wood doesn't tear apart after you take it out. And that's also why I add the extra layer of stabilizer with the cutaway. So I'll try and move the camera frame in just now. Let's start that. Just want to have a bigger piece to show you. So it's going to do her face. And it's also very important to never leave your machine when working on balsa wood. Something could just move and not be where it's supposed to be. So always try and be very, very close, as you have to support the design as well, the balsa wood as well. So then I said I'm going to use my lighter grey. Be close by. I'm going to stop it for now. I want to try and move the camera in closer so that I can show you exactly how open the design is embroidering. As you can see there, it is quite an open design. Yeah. Okay, so we're not going to embroider the entire piece, because it's going to take us about 50 minutes and I don't want to keep everybody up. So I've already pre-embroidered a piece for us, and here it is, created, done, and it came out beautifully. Let's bring it in. I can come a little bit closer for you there. You can see all the detail, you can see the openness of the design, especially there on the cactus. It's quite open, and even on the little lady llama. Okay, so once you've done your embroidery, take out the frame. Try not to hurt the balsa wood when you take the frame out. Try and rather pop the balsa wood to the front and bend the stitch and tear and the cutaway to get it out of the frame rather than pushing it backwards out of the frame. And this is then what the design would look like when you're done. Okay, from here we're going to move back to the other table so that we can cut this to size and then place it inside our art tray. I'm just astonished by this beautiful llamas. Okay, so now that we've done our embroidery, we've taken the piece and the balsa wood with the stabilizer out of the frame, we're going to just first flip it over. And as you can see, I've already prepared this piece. But you can take your nice applique scissors and you can just cut closely your cutaway. You can cut this away all around the design, but leave the stitch and tease stabilizer in place. So you can just cut all around, giving a little bit, it's fine. If you want to cut in between, you can, but it is not necessary really. Just try and cut a little bit neater than that. There we go. Let's also cut out these pieces. Cutting around. Okay. So very important, it's also necessary to remove the plastic, the Avalon, from the front and try and remove as much of the pieces as possible. As you can see, we've really went into all the little crevices, into all the little spaces, and we've removed all of the stabilizer, the water-soluble stabilizer. So with the stitch and tear in place, as you can see, mine is already stuck down because I've prepared this already. You're going to just use your normal Prit, and you're going to Prit and glue the stabilizer to the balsa wood. This is going to create some extra stability when you cut it and when you glue it into place. That one is stuck, and this little corner still needs some glue. And flatten that out. And that piece as well. Okay. So then all around the base where you have stitch and tear, use your Prit to glue the stabilizer to the balsa wood. It dries very quickly, so you can carry on working while it is still busy drying out. Here. So now you have to measure this to fit into our wooden tray. Remove all my scissors. So like I said earlier, our inside is 29, and when you measure this, it measures 30.5 centimeters. We work in centimeters, and then the length is just inside the 41. It's like 40.9 centimeters if you want to be very specific. And what we have here is 42.5 on this one that I cut. So I have to get this one center. I'm going to use the center of my cactus. Like I said, it's just below 42. No, I said 41. No, 41, I almost made a mistake. So it's just on the inside of 41. So I know the half would be just on the inside of 21. Just on the inside of 21. So just fold your tape in half. It's the easiest way to get the middle. Then find the middle. It doesn't have to be exact. Remember, this is art. Be creative and just measure the end. And now I can use that end to find that side. The reason that I'm not just cutting off all of the length on one side is because otherwise my whole design is going to shift. Take your ruler, your sew's companion ruler, and where you've made your mark, just draw a line. And that is the piece that we're going to cut off. Make sure you're straight. Yes, I am. Okay. And do the same on the other side. And cut that off. And as you can see, if you can see that really, this little end is a little bit shorter than that end. And that's why I cut it a little bit bigger so that I can cut straight when I'm done with my embroidery. So again, to get the middle, we say our frame is 29, our tray is 29. To get the half, just fold your tape in half, then it's 14 and a half. So now you can measure, you have a 30 odd mark, so it should be around about there. And I needed, what did I say, 29, which is 14 and a half, and just measure 14 and a half. So I'm barely going to cut off anything at the top. No room. Here's my middle. I was wrong. Should be there. And then mark it at the bottom as well. Now you can use the side lines to make sure you draw a straight line. Just make it straight. Here we go. Don't press too hard on the balsa wood, as otherwise you leave marks. Just press hard enough so that you leave a mark, so that you leave a pencil line behind. And now when you measure, you can just double check your measurements that you will fit inside your frame, inside your tray. 29, perfect. Just on the inside of 29. And this one is on the inside of 41. Double check. Yes. Perfect. And now what you're going to do again is just take your normal tail scissors, paper scissors, and you're going to cut the stitch and tear stabilizer along with your balsa wood. It's going to be a little bit harder to cut it now with the stabilizer, so take care not to bend it, not to the outside pieces you can now bend. Try not to bend the inside. And keep the scissors as straight as possible. And that piece you can throw away. I like cutting the side pieces first, just so because it gives me a little curl. And just cut all the way through. Don't go skew. And then cut on the side. Now you have to be careful not to pull because it will split if you cut. So try and bend this part out of the way, break it if you have to, because now you're working with one piece of balsa wood, and because you've given it strength, it might just break a little bit. So try and cut smaller pieces. I'd rather just break and snap or bend the balsa wood so that you don't snap it and it cracks into the bigger piece of the wood. This is a little bit more difficult part of the balsa wood to cut. If you want to, you can also cut this part off. Just work with smaller pieces. This is now where you have to get something that works for you. Make sure your scissors are straight. This isn't the easiest part to cut. If you go slow and steady, it would work perfect. And then repeat the other side. Line, make sure you find your line. Some pieces of balsa wood are maybe softer than others and cut easier, like this one. It all depends on the balsa wood that you find. And for this pieces, this is where I find where our rotary cutters come in quite handy. If you have an older blade, or even if you use a new blade that's nice and sharp. Okay. Let's throw those pieces away. Clean out my tray. And now you have a beautiful piece of balsa wood that fits in perfectly. Okay, so our next step is to get this part out. Always fit it first before you smear the bottom here with glue. So we're just going to use a little normal wood glue. So this is just paper and wood glue from kids. And we are going to put some in the bottom. I use a little scraper, like a kitchen spatula, to smear it around and get it into the corners. I open up the top just to get enough out. Find it quite easier. And now we have to get it out. Here we go. And you can just smear it all over the base. Take care to get it into the corners especially. Can use a little bit more than that. I'm going to make sure it stays in place. Okay, let's use our spatula. This is quite a thick glue. Depends on the one that you get, how much you have to use. Make sure you get it in the corner. Make sure not to hit the sides. It does dry clear, but it's unnecessary to clean it off. Make sure you especially get it into those edges. Get it into those edges. Focus in the corners. So don't do that. Move it around, don't be afraid to move it around so that it works nicely on your hand. And spray it around. Spread it around evenly. Okay, once it is everywhere, so you can just let your spatula dry, and you can peel off the pieces later. So as you can see, I have it everywhere. I missed a spot, almost have it everywhere. There we go. There, I have it everywhere. So just leave this, set this aside to dry on a surface that you don't mind almost getting dirty. Remember to close this. What's very nice about this wood is we just peel this off once it's dried. So now because you've created this solid base, the balsa wood would also stick a lot easier. Just make sure you cleaned off all the edges. Everything is nice and clean as you want. And drop this in place. And press down. See, I have some extra glue sticking out there. Just wipe that off. It's very nice. You can just grab a paper towel and just wipe it off. Okay. So now we have to create something heavy on this. So we're going to put some extra books on it, and we are going to let it stand overnight. So I have some extra books. Find anything heavy that you can. So I have some books, and I have my, let's turn these two around. Try and put it in the corner. I have my cottons, anything heavy that you can find, stick it on there so that you can create some weight to weigh the balsa wood down. We can even put something in the corner right there. Again, something else that's heavy. Place some crafters boxes on there. Get everything heavy that you have in the house and just place it on there so that the balsa wood is weighed down. Get something for this side in a moment. And then you would leave this overnight. So even what you're going to use for your project, just stack everything on there. Don't want to stack that one on there. Let's create this. So this one's going to give us a base. Stick that on there. Grab your paint, stick it on there. Anything that you can find that's a little bit heavy, that's going to create weight, place it onto the balsa wood, and you would then leave it overnight. Okay ladies, so when you've stacked everything on your design, you're just going to put on your tray and on the balsa wood to keep it in place. You're just going to set this aside. And I've already prepared one for us, so let me just grab it. So it would then look like this. So everything is glued in place. Just grab your threads. Make sure, again, double check that all your Avalon is out, that you've cut all the little jumps. Everything else is cut out perfectly. And as you can see now, my piece is adhered to the bottom of my tray. I'm not going to try and make any bumps in there. I don't want any bumps in my balsa wood. Okay. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to grab some Mod Podge. You can decide here which one you would like to use. Would you either like to use the one that's matte and you get a normal sealer one, or you get a super gloss one? So you can now decide which one you would like to use. The reason that we use the Mod Podge is so that we can seal the wood, so that when we use the prattly glow over the balsa wood doesn't soak up that prattly glow. So what you're going to do is the same brush that you use to paint your tray with, the soft bristle brush. You can just use the Mod Podge, oh goodness, to paint a thin layer of Mod Podge all over your tray. Just dunk it in there and just give it a coat. It doesn't have to be thick, it's just to seal it so that the prattly glow doesn't absorb into the wood. And I've also found that the prattly glow tends to change the color of the thread, makes it a little bit darker. Just try and get in everywhere. This dries quite quickly, so you don't have to wait too long. You can just give it a nice coating. Go. This is not something you have to paint in different directions. You can just stay in one direction. But just make sure everything is coated. And then your paintbrush you can just wash with nice hot water to get the Mod Podge out of the paintbrush. See there, I missed some space. There we go. And that's all you need, and it's already starting to touch dry. I'm just going to put this aside. There we go. My paintbrush aside. And just grab a towel. There we go. There's my towel. I just want to clean the edges off. I'll wash the bristles in a moment. So it's not going to dry on the paintbrush if you leave it for a moment, so that you can carry on. So I'm just going to set that aside. And while I wait for this to dry, it's already starting to become, because you just need a very thin layer. I'm just going to set that aside first. And I'm going to grab, I've just got a very old yogurt container that I've used it previously as well. You can see you can just leave it to dry, the prattly glow inside the containers, and then you can use them again. So prattly glow looks like this. It's also called resin, and the price sometimes differs, but you can use it. It has quite a few applications. We're going to use it on the inside of the tray, and depending on the temperature is how long it would take to set. So you can see you get two bottles, one with a white cap and one with a black cap, and one is your hardener and one is the resin itself. So you have to use both. If you don't decide to use the entire bottle, it's very, very important that you remember to use the same amounts. So if you decide to only use half of the bottle, you have to measure it off. They are quite, that's quite important to remember, that if you don't want to use the entire bottle and save some for later. I found that for my tray that is 28 by 40, just below 41, 2 bottles or 2 boxes covers it quite nicely. Okay, so what I've decided in the meantime, that I don't just want to cover my tray, I want to decorate it a little bit with some rhinestones. I've got quite a selection here. So I'm going to take the cap of my yogurt container. I'm just going to add some of that wood glue. Let's just come out. And you can just use the normal wood glue to glue your rhinestones in place. So that is all I need to dip. It's actually too much to dip my rhinestones in. Just close this and seal it so it doesn't dry out. And then you can just grab a tweezer. So you can use any old tweezers, just something that's going to pick up the rhinestones quite easily. So you can color code this and match this to your thread that you've used. You can use it on different places. So now you can start playing. So I just place a few inside the cap. Let's move up a little bit. So just puts a few in the lids of the containers. It's just easier to grab them that way. Okay. I'm going to take my wood glue and I'm going to decide where I want to glue this onto the tray. So I've decided I'm going to use this little copper brown one. Grab it, oh, goodness. Dip it in your glue and stick it where you want it, and it will stay. You just lightly have to press it into place. So I'm going to use these, and the same principle applies. Just dip them in the glue, bring the glue closer. You can just build a flower. I like that. I don't think I want any more rhinestones anyway. So I'm just going to put this glue away, because when it's done you just peel that off and you can use the lid again. So I'm going to close this. Move that out of the way. So like I said earlier, the Mod Podge does dry quite quickly, so this is already touch dry. But what you can also do is, if you have a heat gun or even a hair dryer can work, you can just dry it a little bit. So if you find that there's still spots that's maybe a little bit tacky to the touch, you can just dry it with the heat gun, and this will also help you, or with the hair dryer, and this will also help you to heat up that glue to get it set. One thing that's very important, please never put your hand in front of this. Heat guns, they get quite hot. We're going to use the heat gun again later, so you have two options: either use a lighter or a heat gun when working with the Prattly Glow. So we are now going to move over. I'm going to just turn that sideways. Make sure you can see that. And I'm going to pull my yogurt tin closer again. As you can see here, my glue dried on my spatula, so I can just pull this off and get the spots. This is dried quite. You want to remove it. There we go. If you pull this off, there we go. So if you pull that off and just throw it away, because you don't want that to get stuck in your Prattly Glow. Just grab a piece of tweezer. See, so it dries quite hard. There we go. So just pull that off to make sure there's no pieces on your spatula. If you're using the same one, if you're using a different one, you can let it be. There we go. So always remove the glue from your spatula. Okay. So now we're just going to empty all of our containers. Another thing to remember that's very important, that when you've opened this and decide to only use half of the contents of the bottle, you have to remember to screw the right cap to the right bottle. If you mix it, you will harden the other product, and then you won't be able to use it again. This is always the hardest pieces to get off. Make sure you have some paper towel or a wet cloth handy, because you do get some of it on your hands. especially when you try pulling this off. They glue this on properly. And it does get quite sticky, so get a wet cloth handy. You're trying to pull it off like this. Oh, and I bent my tweezers. Let's just stick both of them in there. Pull that open. There we go. Then you can just empty the containers. Just make sure your tub is cleaned out. There's no dust or anything in there because that will be stuck in the Prattly Glow. And then you can just empty the 2 containers. As you can see, the one is more runny than the other. If you're not going to use the bottle or like save any product, you could just throw the bottles away. You don't have to screw the tops back on. But this is not a type of bottle that you can rinse out and use for something else. Try and get as much out as you can until it stops dripping. Don't want to waste any product. And then the 4th bottle. Goodness, this is on here quite tightly. And then put in the 4th bottle. The next step is very important. You have to take your time when mixing it. You do have about 10 to 15 minutes to mix and pour and move it around into the corners before the top layer is starting to set. So it's very important to move quite quickly. It also depends on the weather. If it's warmer weather, it sets quicker. If it's colder weather, it takes a little bit longer. So always take that into consideration when you want to do a project with Prattly Glow. So now just take your spatula and start mixing the 2 products together. It will be the resin and your hardener. So I like turning my container, whatever you put it in, while you mix. It just gives it that extra mixture. It's something I learned from my baking days. And you'll see it makes little swirly lines on the inside, and that means it's still not mixed through properly. Let's see if you can see it, but it's really light. So that just means you need to mix a little bit more. Mix in all the directions, in circles, in 8s, clockwise, anti-clockwise, and get it all mixed in. Rather take your time with this step, very important. Still some lines coming through. Yeah. It will create some bubbles, but I'll show you how to take out the bubbles in a moment. Okay, there we go. Still some more. Oh, here's a hair. Just catch it before it goes into the Prattly Glow. Here we go. So now it is mixed through thoroughly. And now all you can do Get some paper towel handy. Some pieces off. You need some place to put your spatula down when you're done, and wipe it off as well. So have some pieces ready. And you can just start pouring. So make sure you pour closer to the edges, not in the edges. You can rather use your spatula to move the product into the edge. And then just scrape out the your container. Make sure you get everything. And as you can see, Bradley Glow is self-leveling, but what I like to do is just move it into the corners. I'll show you, let me show you on this side. And I move quite slowly. You don't want it to push it too far up onto the sides of the tray. So you can pull from the middle, it will level out again. So pull it in to all the little crevices. All the corners, make sure it's in there. If you create little spaces like this, don't worry about it. Like I said, it will level out again. The reason I always use 2 is because if I have little stones like this, it will definitely cover it. Sometimes with a bigger tray, 1 just isn't enough. 1 box of Bradley Glow. This one just needs to go in the corner. It's taking its time. There we go. Just need to get it in that side as well. Everywhere. Okay, so now just let it level out. That's why I have my paper towels ready, and you can wipe this off. This is not a product you can just wash off of the drain, in the sink. You will create blockages and it's quite sticky, so rather wipe it off with a paper towel and throw it away. You can also just wipe out the container you used. Sorry, there's some dripping here. If you've dripped, please clean it off immediately, because if it dries and you try pulling it off, it's going to break either some paint off, depending on where you wasted the product. And you can just clean this out as well. Clean that out later. Okay. So what I like to do now is, once it starts leveling out, is I get a little leveling tool. I can't remember actually what they're called. Someone drop us a name in the comments. And I just like to see if it's level, because you need to leave it level as well. So there, it's not completely level. That side is. We might just have to lift that corner a little bit. I think we have to lift this side completely. So what I do is I take some tape or some paper towel and I fold it. And I just check the level again. So, no, it must be this side. Reading my level wrong again today. Make sure it doesn't fall in there. And wherever you've leveled your product, that is where it has to stay for the next 48 hours to dry. So, I don't know if you can see it on the camera at the moment, but there's quite a few bubbles that has formed part of the mixing process. So you can either take a lighter. What works better is if you have one of those longer lighters, and you can heat the Bradley Glow up a little bit. Don't burn your own fingers. Okay? But other than that, just you can use a heat gun or a hair dryer to remove the bubbles. Don't bring the heat gun too close to the Bradley Glow. You can burn it. sometimes it makes these little waves, especially if you're using a hairdryer. Just move close enough so that you see the bubbles disappearing. You can see if I move it too close, it creates a ripple effect in the crackling layer. So just close enough. All my bubbles is removed. Looks like I missed one. Yes. So once all the bubbles has been removed, I like to keep an eye on it for the next 5 to 10 minutes, because sometimes what does happen is out of the bottom of the balsa wood, bubbles do form, so that I can be ready with the heat gun or with the lighter or with the hair dryer to remove those bubbles. But after 15 minutes, you cannot touch or do anything to the top surface anymore, because the top would have started to set. And if you then touch it, it would make little points. There's a bubble that formed. So as they form, just remove them. And then you can just leave it to dry for the next 48 hours. Remove that for you. And just to show you again what your end product would look like, it would look like this.